Hello, and welcome back to the Aced It podcast. This is season 9, of course, where we turn science into sense. In this season, we provide 10 timely episodes with the hopes of helping listeners understand what we can learn from current research on harm reduction. And let me just say, there is so much here to learn. So, I'm glad you're with us. I'm Danielle Rudes, your host, and this is Aced It. In this episode, we are diving into an essential and sometimes overlooked aspect of recovery: peer supports. Many people taking their first steps towards recovery find that having a support network, especially one that includes people who have successfully navigated their own recovery journeys, is crucial. This, of course, makes a lot of sense. Having a mentor who walked the path you're on can make your goals feel more attainable. Plus, it's often easier for us to share our struggles with those we believe will have genuine empathy toward our situation. Today, we will explore the powerful impact of peer recovery interventions by examining the latest scientific research on how these interventions are helping individuals in their recovery journeys. According to the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, or SAMHSA, peer recovery workers are folks who help those struggling with substance use disorders. What makes peer support workers especially unique is that they have lived experience with substance use themselves, and so they are able to provide a more profound level of empathy. Peer support operates on multiple levels. It's emotional. Peers are able to provide empathy and care. It's motivational, demonstrating the achievability of recovery. It's also informational. Peers can assist in skill building. It's instrumental, guiding individuals to specific support resources, and it's affiliational, fostering social connectedness. Peer support is truly a holistic harm reduction approach, where those in recovery can work with a guide or coach who has been in their shoes. During peer recovery interventions, the main goal is to keep recovery at the forefront, and peer recovery coaches, or PRCs, play a crucial role in this. They engage the client with educational programming and coaching, helping a person set recovery goals, develop a plan for recovery, and work toward maintaining recovery. Now let's talk about the research. A few studies examine whether peer recovery support helps individuals with substance use disorders. One notable study was conducted by Reif and colleagues and is entitled Peer Recovery Support for Individuals with Substance Use Disorders, Assessing the Evidence. This study examines 10 scientific research articles that were published between 1995 and 2012. These 10 studies all examined the effectiveness of peer recovery support, but did so across a variety of populations. Some studies, for example, looked at peer recovery support among people who were pregnant and using substances, while others looked at people who were using substances and who were involved with the criminal legal system. Reif and colleagues categorized the 10 studies based on the rigor of the analysis. The closer the study was to an actual experiment, the more rigorous it was considered. These most rigorous studies showed strong support for the benefits of peer recovery interventions. For example, several studies found that individuals who worked with peer recovery coaches had lower rates of cocaine and opiate use. Plus, 6 months after the intervention, drug-free rates remained high. Even the less rigorous studies showed substantial support. For example, one study found that people who had peer recovery coaches and who had previously been hospitalized were less likely to be re-hospitalized for substance use-related issues, staying in the community for longer periods of time. People who worked with peer recovery coaches also reported more satisfaction with the peer recovery service, appreciating the empathy that the coaches showed. Overall, these findings highlight the success of peer recovery interventions. However, it's hard to generalize or draw wide-ranging conclusions here because these services offered and the population studied are so varied. So now, let's explore an area where these interventions might be particularly beneficial: behavioral activation. According to the authors of an article, Adapting a Peer Recovery Coach-Delivered Behavioral Activation Intervention for Problematic Substance Use in a Medically Underserved Community in Baltimore City, behavioral activation is an evidence-based intervention that was originally developed for people with depressive disorders. Behavioral activation, or BA for short, encourages people to engage in activities that they find rewarding, essentially giving them a break from feelings that might lead to urges toward substance use. As Satinsky and colleagues describe it, it allows people to engage in activities that are incompatible with substance use. In this case, peer recovery coaches play a crucial role in aiding the behavioral activation process. The Satinsky study takes place in Baltimore, where overdose fatality rates are among the highest in the U.S., and people who live in under-resourced neighborhoods in Baltimore often face many challenges when assessing treatment for substance use. Satinsky and colleagues propose that this is the ideal setting where peer recovery coaches can make a real difference. Peer recovery coaches can help people overcome stigma and structural barriers to recovery and assist those struggling with housing instability to navigate services that can assist them. Satinsky and colleagues' study has two goals. First, they aim to examine if peer recovery coach-delivered behavioral activations are appropriate for individuals from low-income communities. Second, they seek to understand the barriers that exist to implementing this kind of program. Toward these goals, they use a qualitative approach, where researchers conduct interviews and focus groups with both the target population, people who use substances, and peer recovery coaches and general staff. In total, the research team conducted qualitative interviews with 30 people who were seeking services at a Baltimore-based community resource center, 6 people who worked at the center as general staff, and 6 peer recovery coaches. The questions in these interviews were centered on working with peer recovery coaches, readiness for change, and perceived needs. Breaking down the key stats for the target population of this study, those who were seeking services at the Community Resource Center, 70% were male, 50% were Black, 47% were white, and 3% reported their race as mixed. Less than half had a high school degree, and only about a third were currently working. As we might expect, 70% had what was considered problematic substance use, with cocaine and opioid use being the most problematic substances listed. About 38% of people reported having injected drugs, and almost half had previous experience with medically assisted treatment for substance use. So, we see that this is quite a diverse population. After the researchers conducted the interviews, they then looked for themes that were common among all participants. They identified 6 themes in total, 2 general themes, 2 that spoke to the barriers experienced in working with or as a peer recovery coach, and 2 themes that highlighted areas that facilitate the peer recovery coach model when it comes to behavioral activation. Let's talk about the first and maybe the most important theme. Participants agreed that they prefer working with peer recovery coaches. Many said they appreciated the fact that the peer recovery coaches had experience with substance use themselves, instead of being, quote-unquote, book-taught. They also felt less judged and more motivated on their recovery journey, since they saw it working for someone else. In terms of behavioral activation, many participants said that this method could work because there are things that kept them busy and don't allow them time for substance use. The 2 examples shared were exercising and religious activities. Participating in these 2 behaviors was noted as keeping people busy and making drug-using urges less severe. Now, let's talk about some of the barriers to successful peer recovery intervention that were also noted in these interviews. These barriers were noted both among the target population and among peer recovery coaches. One major barrier was structural and environmental factors. Many people utilizing services at the Community Resource Center faced unstable lives, homelessness, and financial issues. The constant presence of drugs in the community made working toward recovery even more difficult. Another significant barrier was the severity of drug use. For individuals deep in addiction, it was impossible to think about anything else, let alone do anything else. During these initial stages, something more might be needed, like medically assisted treatment to help bridge the gap and make peer recovery interventions more successful. However, the interviews also revealed supports that can enhance peer recovery interventions. Providing additional supports, like assisting with basic needs, is crucial. Once issues such as housing and food insecurity are dealt with, then the recovery journey can begin in earnest. Peer recovery coaches here noted that they bring value to this and they can act as a bridge to these much needed services. And as we just discussed, they can link people with medically assisted treatment as needed. So overall, the program in Baltimore seems to be positive, but there are barriers that still need to be addressed. In closing, research into peer recovery interventions shows a path forward in addressing substance use with compassion and effectiveness. Utilizing a lived experience approach to harm reduction can help individuals in their recovery journeys and provide a promising step toward reducing overdose rates. Thank you for listening to the ACED podcast. We love hearing from you. So if you have comments, topics to suggest, or some science you'd like us to cover in a future season, please write to me, Danielle Rudes at Sam Houston State University. My email is drudes@shsu.edu. And of course, thank you to the Justice Community Opioid Innovation Network, or JCOIN's Coordination and Translation Center, funded by the National Institute on Drug Abuse, housed at George Mason University, where this podcast originated. Thank you to our fabulous scriptwriters, Dr. Alyssa Toman from Texas State University and Sam Houston State University doctoral student Caitlin Bauer. And a huge and heartfelt thank you to Jason Luchin and the team at Slonky LLC for their spectacular production. Tune in again soon for another episode of ACED.